Today I'm going to conduct a full recording session, audio and video, so filming as well as recording, and I'm going to cut it all together at the end on LumaFusion, which is a fantastic bit of software for the iPad. It's really powerful. This is how I've done all of my tunes from the last couple of years, and you can see all of those in my playlist marked tunes. Now, of course, it's very involved. The digital audio workstation that you use to record, that's up to you. I use Logic Pro X, but you can use anything and then bring the audio file, the master audio, into LumaFusion at the end. LumaFusion is the only specific software that I'm using. The camera you're watching this on is a DJI Osmo Action, so it's kind of a GoPro-y kind of thing. Behind me I've got a piece of black fabric. Now this really does help you, especially if you've got lots of view on the screen at any one time. You don't get the sort of the fading in and out of the pictures, so that's quite important to settle on a background. Let's get started. My first take then is going to be the bass. Now on the digital audio workstation on Logic Pro X, you can see on your screen there's a green MIDI file there. That is just a set of drums to get me going, and then I can put real drums on at the end. Now I've just got to check, I've got to add a track for my bass and make sure that I can hear everything. This is really important, that the mix as you're going through is completely right. So if I just press play, there's some drums for me to play to. Now I've got to just add an audio track, which I'll do here. Input 1, and just make that input ready so I can hear it. The bass is a bit louder than the drums at the moment, so I'm actually going to just crank those drums up a little bit. I'm just using the Abbey Road 70s drum kit here. Let's just up the level of that a little bit. Fine. Okay, so as is what I usually do, especially when I'm cutting this, I might leave a couple of bars before I do anything at all. In fact, I'm going to leave 4 bars. It's always worth leaving a bit of time at the start, so that especially if you're sitting down at the drums ready to play, that there's enough rhythm that you can hear and get yourself ready. So, bass guitar first. Now, just camera wise, I've just got to make sure that I can fit in the bass completely. That'll be fine. Don't want the headstock to be cut off at the edge of the picture, for example. Get everything in that you can. Now at this stage it's worth maybe overexposing or just having a little bit of a brighter sort of picture, because when you cut and the videos together, and if you merge them or to have the edges a bit softer, it can lower the brightness, so you end up with a very dark picture otherwise. But that's fine. I'm just looking at it on my monitor that I can see. Let's get started. And there we go. So that's my bass part recorded. Notice at the end I just played that bam, 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 and then just stayed still for a bit, because you never know what you're going to do at the end. You don't want to suddenly reach for the camera to switch it off. So that's the bass guitar part done. So maybe time for some rhythm guitar. I'm going to use guitar preamps that are available on that. On Logic itself. I'm not going to mic up any guitar amps, although of course you can do that. You can do anything you like. That's the thing. Don't let anyone tell you that you can't do something, or you need this mic or this amp for this or this amp for that. The answer is that you do exactly what you like. So I'm just going to plug this in and then make sure that that's going to work. So I'm just going to add a new track on Logic, had the same thing again. I'm just going to use the standard amplifier that you get on Logic Pro X. In fact, I'm going to go a bit Fendery here. Large blackface combo. Let's just take the output down slightly so that I can strum away and not worry about volume. Okay, well, that sounds all right. So I'm just going to get started with that then. So this will involve me cutting a separate part of this video. So I've got this video that you're watching at the moment. I've also got to chop it to bits in order to get it into LumaFusion. In fact, just to make it easier for myself, I'm going to press stop on the camera and then restart it again so I don't end up with masses of video files, or a very large one video file. Okay, so we're on a new camera video file now, and I'm going to go back to the beginning and just press record. So there's some guitar. Now I'm going to record another guitar part. I could just use another guitar for this, not only for the sound but also for the visuals, and get something that's a bit different. So now I've got my Telecaster. I'm just going to also bring the level down of that rhythm guitar that I played in, because it's a little bit loud in the mix. So I'm just going to add another track, exactly the same track. The thing is, you can change your amplifier settings afterwards. You don't have to, because it's all on computer, you can decide to have a different amplifier without having to re-record anything. And actually the simulations really are very good indeed. Now at the moment you can see that the bottom of my guitar is actually cut off slightly. So I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to stop the video and re-record it again so that basically I don't end up with a massive video file to chop up at the end. Here we go with the second guitar part. And here we are. So there's the second guitar part. Now I have put a little guitar solo bit. I've allowed 4 bars for just a little sort of solo-y section. So I can do that, but I'm going to take a little break while I just work out what I'm going to do next. It's very easy to just keep going regardless and think, and not actually give yourself time to think of things to do. I'm going to put a guitar solo track now, so I'm going to actually run the thing from the top and just put little bits and pieces in. Now of course you may need to redo this if the vocals aren't really working with it. Some people would at this moment elect to put down a guide vocal. But you can do any of the parts afterwards because it's all to a click, it's all very easy, multi-track. You can just keep layering up or replacing parts right at the end. For example, I could redo the bass. So I've got my other guitar here and I'm going to do a guitar solo track. So on Logic here, I'm just going to add another track, but this time I'm going to change the amp or just raise the gain a little bit, just so that I can hear what I'm doing. A bit more mid. And then make the track ready to record. Yeah, it's enough compression, enough distortion on that to sort of get me to get going. I'm just going to turn the volume up a little bit, just a little bit of a sound check. So I'm going to just give myself, and just take those other guitars down a bit and my lead guitar up slightly. I could even just up the reverb just to give me a little bit more of a, just a little bit more of a sort of presence, a little bit more of a platform on which to record. So I'm going to go from the beginning and just put in some bits and pieces. Let's have a look. Okay, here we go. Okay, so there's some lead guitar. Now, regardless of what you think of your take, if you think, oh, I could have done this, I could have done that, I could have done the other, sometimes take one can be the one, because you're in there in the zone just thinking, "Argh," and it might work. So now I'm going to put some vocals down. So I've got to set up another mic, I've got to set up headphones, I've got to do all that sort of thing. Here we go. Okay, so now to put some vocals down, I've got one of these SE reflection filters here. The room is reasonably dead anyway, but it's quite useful to have one of these. It's basically like a semicircle with some cardboard and some material in, just to minimise reflections. I've got a AKG C414 mic here, and also a pop shield, so any P's and B sounds that I put into the microphone aren't actually going to be registered by the diaphragm. You get that sort of poof sound on playback. Now, just looking at the computer, I've just got to add an audio track in order that I can put my vocals down. So I'm going to add audio input 2. That's what I need. Now I've just got to make sure you can see on the screen there's a sort of a level flickering up and down. Fly like an eagle, fly. Okay, I might actually just bring the level of that down a little bit. Something that's a little bit too quiet on a digital audio workstation isn't necessarily going to be the end of the world, but something that's too loud, of course, that's going to be scrap. So I'm going to just go from the start and then sing my part over this. Let's have just a check of my headphones. Now I've got my DT100s, Bear Dynamic DT100s. They're fantastic headphones. They come in two different impedances. So you've got to make sure if you've got the higher impedance ones like I've got here, that you've got an amp that is powerful enough to drive them. Luckily, I do. So I'm going to play back from the beginning and see what happens. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. So that's the end of the vocal part. Now I've got some keyboards to record yet and some drums. I'm going to put the keys down next. So that means that I'm going to end up actually with 7 video tracks, video files, not 6. Reason for 6 is that actually LumaFusion can do only 6 at once. Only 6 at once. It's amazing for what it can do. But because I've got 7 tracks, I'm going to need to do something a little bit sort of creative with 2 or 3 of the tracks so that I can fit it all on. Now I'm going to do some keyboards. I've just got a tiny little keyboard MIDI controller here. Now, when you're recording this, I want ideally the back of the keyboard here to be right angles with the camera, which it kind of is. There we go. Is it a bit like that? Yeah, that's about right. Now the reason for this is that you can put it on one side of your video at the end and you can align this up with the edge of your screen. Of course, it's up to you what you do. Now I've got to get a keyboard sound, so I'm just going to look on the computer and find something that I can play through. So I'm going to go for software instrument. And I'll tell you what, I'm just going to use one of the Logic keyboard sounds. I can change this at the end, of course. So I'm just going to do just a quick sound check to make sure I can hear everything. Into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping. Yeah, that's all right. I might just put a little bit of reverb and compression on those vocals so that they just stand out a little bit. So I'm going to put a compressor on. Actually, I'll just take the very, very bassiest end off that first. I always tend to do this. Take everything really below about 100 Hertz. Just ramp it right down, then stick it through a compressor. And then perhaps a de-esser as well. Well, yeah, definitely a de-esser. Now you can, let's have a quick listen to that. Future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. I wanna fly like an eagle to the sea. Fly like an eagle, let my spirit carry me. Wanna fly go till I'm free. Oh Lord, through the revolution. Okay, so it's a little bit of preliminary, just jiggery pokery bit of mixing there, just to make that vocal sit a bit better in the mix. Of course, de-essing and compressing, you can actually switch those the other way around. You can put the de-esser first and then the compressor. That might actually give you a bit of a better result. Once again, everything is down to whether your ears say, yes, that's good, or no, it's not. Now, I'm going to put some keys down and see how we go. I'm just going to raise the level of the keyboards just a little bit. Just so I've got a bit of dynamic control so I can play quietly as well as loudly. So here we go. I'm just going to add a little bit more actually. Let's go from the start, and here we go. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping. And there we go. So there's some keyboards. Right, now to do some drums. Now what I've done is I've set up my quite basic kit here. I've got a kick, snare, hi-hats and a sort of crash ride cymbal. I've got a mic on the bass drum, I've got a mic on the snare, I've got a mic on the hi-hat, and I've got these two over the top, which basically give me my stereo width. So I need to make ready 5 tracks on the computer. Now of course, if you don't have more than 2 inputs on your digital audio workstation, you can't do this sort of thing, but actually you can get an 8-way mic preamp reasonably cheaply, and it allows you to do this sort of thing. So I'm just going to make ready some tracks on the computer. I need 5 audio tracks. There we go, 5. And I need various inputs. So actually I'm going to name these. Now naming your tracks is a good idea. I should have done that before, but actually with single guitar parts it's not such a hassle. Hi-hats, and overhead left and overhead right. So kick needs to go on input 15. This is just the way that I've got my things set up. Input 16 for snare, input 14 for hi-hats, and then input 1 for the and 2 for the overheads. So the next thing to do is to actually just put them all into record, and then just scratch each microphone, and also just to test the level. So kick drum, there you go, you can see that on the kick there. Of course it's going to be coming up on the overheads as well. Snare, there's plenty on those hi-hats. Really, the overheads could do with coming down ever so slightly. Remember, you can under-record. Over-recording is not good. Under-recording isn't such a huge hassle. Now I've got my pair of headphones here, so I'm just going to go ahead and, using the original drums, I'm going to play along to those as well. So I've got drums, I've got everything in the mix. Let's see what happens with that. Okay, so there's my drum part. Now I've got to just check all those levels, make sure they look okay. Those overheads may be slightly over recorded, but I do have the zoom function open on Logic actually. So if I just take those away, actually there's nothing wrong with those at all. So I'm going to do some mixing now, make sure that it's all going to tie up. So I'm going to mute the original drums, the 8-beat that I recorded to, in order that I can use my own drum takes. Here we go. Here's a bit of mixing. Now on the computer screen you can see all my recordings. All the audio tracks are in blue, and there's that one green one which is the keyboard part that I put in. I haven't done any quantizing to the keyboard. I haven't done anything to it at all. It's just as I played it in. Now, just listening back from the beginning, just put the faders up and see what happens. We don't want to go too mad with plugins just yet. Really, only the ones you need. We don't want to over compress anything. So if we have a little listen, I'll just take the master down a little just so it doesn't clip the output of the computer. It's kind of all there at the moment. I mean, there's nothing that's glaring there. Of course, you can spend weeks mixing, but I haven't got time for that. So what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to solo out the kick drum and the bass guitar, just as a little sort of experiment with that low end. We don't want any low end on anything else. You just want the bass on the bass guitar, kick drum, maybe low tom if I had one. I didn't, but that sort of thing. So let's just see what happens with this. So at the moment I put the compressor on that kick drum, but I'm actually overloading the output level here. So I'm actually going to turn the level of the kick and the bass down, just so that I've got a bit of headroom on the output of the computer. So what I've done there is put a bit of ultra low end on the bottom of the kick drum with a bit 1-2K, so I can get the beta as well. And of course, you know, the mic was in front of the kick drum, which itself doesn't have a hole in the front skin, so you are limited to the amount of click that you can get. But being a small bass drum, in order to get all that tone out of it, it's useful not to have a hole in the front.
Slipping into the future.
Okay, so on the vocals, you can see on the left-hand side, the EQ pane there, I've actually cut the bass, so below about 100 Hertz. Now, I really want to do that with the overheads as well. I don't want to have any rumble there because I need that kick drum to be really tight. Now, you can set the slope that you want. I'm just going to go fairly draconian below about 100 Hertz again. So that means that my kick drum is not going to be sort of swamped by anything else. So I'll just do the same on the other track. I know you can cut and paste settings, but sometimes it's nice just to go in and do that. So now I've got my overheads. If I just solo those out, solo these out, and just to check that that works. Not a huge amount of snare on that snare mic itself, though it's only being captured by the overheads. That's okay. It may be that we don't need that snare mic. But let's see what happens if I just compress that slightly and just bring the snare drum a little bit more present in the mix. I might even elect to stick a little bit of sort of high mid and cut the bass as well, just to see what happens with that.
Slipping into the future.
Just provides a little bit more cut on that. It cuts through the mix a bit better. Hi-hats wise, let's see what happens if I just really ramp up that top end.
Time keeps on slipping into the future.
It's not all that present as a signal, so I might just actually put a gain stage in before that, just so that the equalizer's got something to work with. Let's try 6 dB. Well, actually 9. That's a bit better. Now, sometimes I don't use the hi-hat mic. I just think, well, do you know what? It didn't really make much difference. But I'm just going to listen back and just mute the hi-hats, just bring them in and out, bring it in and out to see what happens there.
Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping.
Oh, it does give it a little bit of a nicer sort of top-end edge there. So, guitars. Let's have a little listen to that rhythm guitar.
Into the future.
Yeah, and maybe the guitar line as well. I'll bring that up slightly, and I'm going to pan these as well, just a little bit. Actually, that's probably quite a lot.
Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future.
Okay, now vocals-wise, that needs to come up a bit. Can't really hear what's going on there. That's got the most plugins at the moment. Everything else has got maybe a compressor and an EQ. We don't want to squash too much. If you sent this to a mastering facility and you'd squashed everything, there's not much they can do with it.
I wanna fly like an eagle to the sea. Fly like an eagle, let my spirit carry me. Wanna fly like an eagle till I'm free. Oh Lord, through the revolution.
So the vocals are quite sort of smooth in terms of their frequency range. I want them to cut through the mix a little bit more. Now, this is the other thing. If you push lots of faders up, it's just going to be a bit of a mess. Whereas if you use EQ to have that loudness as a bit more of a sort of perceived loudness, actually you can get something that has that sort of dynamic range as well as being, you know, having that sort of tough compressed sound.
I wanna fly like an eagle to the sea. Fly like an eagle, let my spirit carry me. Wanna fly like an eagle till I'm free. Oh Lord, through the revolution.
Now, the output at the moment is quite high, so I want to maybe put an EQ there so that I can just bring up the overall mid-range. Now, this is something I do just to... Everyone sort of goes, oh yeah, bass and lots of crisp treble, but the mid-range does tend to get a bit forgotten. Whereas if you bring that up, that's quite a good way of making the thing seem a little bit louder.
I wanna fly like an eagle to the sea. Fly.
Now, at the moment, everything is quite loud. Now, that could be the general mix, but I could bring the EQ down, maybe just use the gain stage of the EQ just to bring everything down so that that limiter isn't squashing everything.
Slipping into the future. I wanna fly like an eagle to the sea. Fly like an eagle, let my spirit carry me.
Now, at the moment, the only thing that's setting that limiter off is the snare drum. So I could think, well, okay, let's just take that away. Let's use a multi-band compressor instead so that that snare, which doesn't seem too loud to me, but it is setting it off. Let's use the multi-compressor so I can just squash the mid-range a little bit more, leaving things like the top end a little bit more sort of unsullied.
Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. I wanna fly like an eagle to the sea. Fly like an eagle, let my spirit carry me. Wanna fly like an eagle till I'm free. Oh Lord, through the revolution. Slipping, slipping, slipping into the future.
Of course, it depends what you're doing. and you can be here a week just sort of tweaking a particular EQ on a channel. And actually, well, yes, of course, if I was doing this as like a commercial release, it would be rather a slower process, and there'd be much more scrutiny, including things like automation. Now, at the end, I want to make sure that there aren't any noises. So what I'm going to do is just to select everything and just cut right at the end there. Delete everything else. I don't need that guide drum track anymore. And actually what I'm going to do is going to put a little fade on each one like that. Let's just check that. Perfect. Likewise at the beginning. Now, don't chop right on the bar line, because actually with sort of strumming guitars and drums, it's likely that it's going to come in very slightly beforehand. So I'm going to just cut everything off at the beginning. There we go. Take that away as well. And then put a fade on each of these. Just a tiny little one at the beginning. So if we listen from bar 4, we want to have a little pre-roll, because also with the film, we don't want it to suddenly start. So you press click on the browser and it's kind of taken the first half a second off. We don't want that at all. So there we are. I've got something now that is pretty loud on my output. So I'm going to bounce this. And then the next thing to do is to put all the films together. Now I've got all of the files onto the iPad. Now I haven't shown the process by which this is done, because actually you can do it quite a few ways. You could have a memory card, or you could do this, that or the other. But essentially I've sent all the video files and the audio mixes to the iPad, but they can be opened up in LumaFusion. So when you open up LumaFusion, you're faced with this page. You get press plus to create your first project. So I'm going to do that. Bottom left there. My project, frame rate. Right, I've recorded this at 30 frames per second. Sometimes I do 60. In fact, most of my video demos are at 60 frames, which just gives you a slightly sort of rounder edge. But just to help the iPad out, because it's videoing its own output, doing a video demonstration and video mixing, I've opted for 30. So, new project, and there we go. Now we end up with a timeline here. You can see at the bottom in the center, you've got a blue sort of little box and a green box. The blue is for video and the green is for audio. Now, what I'm going to do with this is actually to put the audio track down first. So at the top left, there's a little sort of flower symbol there. If I just click that and go to imported and then other app, this is where audio files are sent. So I've got Fly Like an Eagle recording, and actually that's the main recording session that I did, and flylikeaneagle.wav, which is 1 minute and 8 seconds, and that's what I want to do. So I'm going to cut this by moving the audio file down to the green there. Now if I play this back, there's my audio file. You can see there's a very handy audio trace all the way along here. You can see that it's essentially showing an audio representation. This is going to be really helpful for when you come to do your mixing. Now, if I go to the top left button again, I'm going to click the folder symbol. This time I'm going to select photos and videos. Now, this is where your all of my video files are going to be, and you can see them all listed here along the side there. So the first one would be my bass. Now I'm going to opt to have that as my first thing. Now when you put your first video file in, that is locked. You can't get rid of it then. You can do all sorts of things with the other videos, but I'm going to drag that DJI 0972. I mean, I couldn't rename them, but actually it gives you a clue as to the picture anyway. Now when I drag this in, you can see that I'm sort of talking my way through actually that's the introduction. I don't want that. I want the bass guitar, which is the next one. There we go. So now you can see that I'm essentially talking my way through the bass part, and I have to find out where it's going to start. Now I can do this by just taking the audio of the pre-recorded signal down, leaving only the camera audio. It's useful to have that audio there. Input ready so I can hear it. So there are my drums, and then okay, I'm obviously still sound checking, so I've got to find where the bass part actually begins. There it is. So I can actually cut this here. There's where it starts. So that's at 2 minutes 45. So what I can do is I can pinch the my fingers together to decrease the scale, and then bring my audio file along so that it matches up with the drums there. So 2:45. Once you've done this first one, it becomes much easier. So I'm just going to open this out here. So I can see that my first note is there. Now if I just drag my fingers open there, I should find, you can see that the trace is kind of matching up. Now this is where you just gradually bring in the volume level of the other track and just check that they sync up. And they do. This means I can now disable the audio of the bass, like that, because I've now know that my track is correct. Now, what I need to do is to maybe just go back slightly before the audio starts and actually delete, or rather split that track, and I'm going to get rid of that first bit there. Now, what happens with the main track is if you get rid of that first bit, it will essentially return the whole thing to the start like this, so that your timeline now begins at 0, 0, 0. Now at the end of the track, I want to cut the bass, but as you can see I stood a bit still at the end, so I'm just going to cut that there. Now I can't remember whether I'd put guitar parts down. Yes I did, I had, but actually I did it as a separate file. So I can get rid of that now. I can go back to the beginning and I can import my next thing, which is going to be my guitar. So I'm just going to drag that in. Now, of course, there's a lot of talking going on here because I'm making the video at the same time as doing the recording. It's all a little bit haphazard, shall we say. There we go. So I'm just going to find where the beginning of this is. So it's about there. There we go. So I'm going to just split the track there, get rid of what came before it, and then move this with respect to my bass and my drums that my bass guitar rather, that I've put in beforehand. So hopefully now the starting point of this will be roughly in the same place as where the bass starts. When you open up the scale, you can move things to a finer degree, which is actually really handy. And that actually begins with the audio track there. Now I can drag the video track back so that you can see the guitar working with that. So if I now bring up the soundtrack very slightly with respect to the guitar, I can do the same as with the bass. See, there's a very slight lag there. Whether or not you'll notice the lag when you actually come to video this is another matter. So that's fine. Actually, it's okay. It's absolutely fine. Now you can't see the bass at the moment. I'll put the bass part down. The answer is because the video tracks you can get 6 on this, the top one in your timeline actually represents the one that you will see over the top of the others. So there is a sort of a hierarchy here. So what I'm going to do is now to resize the guitar track a bit, so that I can actually, if I do this, you can see that the bass guitar part is behind it. So I want my rhythm guitar probably to be quite quite small. Now at the same time I can crop the rhythm guitar as well, so that there's no wasted space around the side. Maybe something like that. If I now go up the cropping arrow, it then reveals my blue square again, which is basically the size of the video, and then I can drag the middle part of it perhaps to the bottom of the screen like this. Now I can do the same with the bass without going back to my main window by simply clicking that and then adjusting the size of the bass. So I can say, okay, well I'm going to put the bass guitar down here, and then I can go back to my timeline and start importing other things. You can do this afterwards, but actually, yeah, I'm going to do it now. Now, I seem to remember recording both rhythm guitars in a single take. No, I didn't. No, I can see on my timeline that I didn't do that. So I'm just going to cut that part in the same places with the bass and get rid of that. Go back to the beginning and then import my guitar part. My rhythm guitar, or the guitar line. Now this, of course, that's going to start in a different place. There we go. You can see by the trace, so I've got my 4 bars of drums. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I just find that part. There it is. So if I just split that now, I'm going to get rid of what came before and then drag this back to the beginning just to match up with everything else that came at the start there. So I'll just open my fingers up there to make sure that I've got the same beginning. I'll just try that and gradually bring in the soundtrack. It's ever so slightly behind. I want to try and drag that a bit. Of course, if you're working at 60 frames, you actually get slightly better accuracy because there are twice as many frames in that per second. So you can get away with, you can sort of adjust to a finer degree. That'll do me absolutely fine. It's virtually impossible. When you take the audio away, it's virtually impossible to detect that level of sync error. So I'm going to, at the same time, resize this guitar part. And I'm also going to crop it. You can crop first or afterwards, it doesn't really matter. Everything is non-destructive, really, really handy. And I'm just going to resize that. So I'm going to put essentially the band is at the bottom, the guitar and the bass and the 2 guitars. Now, as I said in the recording itself, I'm going to end up with 7 things, but you can't have 7 because there is actually a maximum of 6 video tracks. Now my keyboard part rather, was all the way to the right, so the keyboard was coming in from the right hand side of the screen. So what I'm going to do is to move one of my guitar parts that's on the right hand side there. I'm going to move that very slightly to the left like that. Now you can see that it's been cut off very, very sort of ungraciously by the Telecaster in the middle there. However, if I go to my middle part, the Telecaster, and go to cropping and then edge softness, you can see that it allows actually my elbow, when I'm playing the Yamaha, that red guitar, to appear at the same time as the Telecaster. Nice. That means that if I just double click on this, for example, you can see that it's a bit of a fade between the headstock of the Telecaster and the Yamaha guitar there, which means I can have my keyboard on the right hand side of the screen. I can't add the keyboard yet because I need to do other parts. Although, because the vocal is the most important, perhaps I could have the keyboard part in. Let's do that actually. I'll just get the keyboard rather, and bring that in. So that's this one here. So a bit of talking before I record the keyboard sound. Find my drums. There we go. There's the drum intro. Now I'll just find where that is. I'm still talking away. Okay. So actually I need to There we go. I think I did a bit of an adjustment to the mix, which is why the keyboard takes so long. So I'll just split that, get rid of that, pinch my fingers together to reveal the entire video. Just go back to the beginning and make sure that my part is actually going to be in sync. It looks pretty good, maybe just slightly back. You can see that the trace matches up because it's the same backing track that I'm using, so it's really handy. Having these telltale audio sort of audiograms along the side is actually really helpful. So I'm going to start everything at the same time as well. Now my keyboard part is going to go all the way to the right hand side of the screen, revealing the rest of the band. So actually I'm going to move that there. I'm going to resize it slightly, and I'm going to crop most of me out. There we go. So it's just, and put a little bit of the edge softness on as well, so it looks like I'm just at the side playing the keyboards. And then I can lower that to the bottom like that. There we go. That's absolutely fine. I could actually go slightly further to the right, hiding the keyboard controls so you can only see the keyboard itself. So let's have a look at what's happening at the moment with all of those parts. Fine. Okay. So I'm going to maybe bring in my vocals now. What else have I got? Oh, lead guitar and vocals. Oh, I've got my drums to do. I'll put the drums in next. So there's going to be a big long preamble while I sound check the drums and all of that, and do the headphones, and yeah, I think that's about right. Oh no, yeah, sound check, and there we go. So that's my beginning of my drums. Get rid of that, and then bring all that back here, like so. Let's see what happens there. I've got beginning of my drums, actually it's slightly late, so I'll just bring that back maybe to there, and then just check that the drums match up with the so I'll just take all the audio files away apart from the drums and a bit of the soundtrack. No, I need it to come in because I had one click before I started. So let's have a look at that. Just bring that slightly along. Yeah, I reckon that's about right. So if I just lower the level of the camera on the drums because they're quite loud. Fine. And then now the drums, you can see the rest of my studio there is a bit of a mess with cables. Well, there's not much I can do about that. I recorded everything else to a black background, but let's just see what happens if I try softening the edges of this. So I'm just going to crop the drums slightly to the left and the right. In fact, I could probably, if I just, and at the bottom as well, you can't see the bass drum overall. I could just maybe do something like that. That's fine. Hide some of the mess, but not all. But it's a studio and I'm just making a video. So if I do that like that, that'll be fine, I'm sure. Now I've got my lead guitar to put in lastly. So I'm just going to do that. Now the lead guitar is this one here. Waffle, waffle, waffle. He's talking nonsense while he's checking, and just find the beginning. There we go. There's my drums, and I'll just split that there. Get rid of that. Move this back to the beginning. So once you've done this a few times, it becomes actually reasonably straightforward. Okay. So I'll just move that slightly that way, so that it matches up with the beginning of the soundtrack. And do the same thing as before, soundtrack versus camera audio. You're not going to hear the time lag there. Or not going to see it, rather. So if I just go back to beginning and play with the lead guitar, you can see that what I'm playing there matches the solo on the record. There we are. Now, because it's the lead guitar is about the sort of the guitar itself and the fretboard, I could actually make this slightly larger so that you can only see the fretboard. So if I just go to the top and the bottom there, and then left, right, increase the size slightly. So I'm going to go back to cropping and put some edge softness on it there. And now that means that you can see my lead guitar kind of mixed in a little bit larger with respect to the other instruments. And there we are. So what we're going to do now, well, we're just going to check at the end, because actually the very end of the tune is about there. So I'm just going to, now if you click outside the box and nothing's selected and then press the scissors tool, it splits everything, which means I can now get rid of all of the nonsense that came after that. And there we are. So at the end, don't know what was happening with the keyboards there. That was slightly odd. It sort of kept going. Now, what that means, I don't know. Intriguing. That's completely wrong with the keyboards there. I must have started again, maybe. I think I did. Let's just check that. Oh, let's mute the main thing. Yeah, I remember I did a second take on the keyboards. So that means I'm going to split that there, get rid of that, bring this back to the beginning, and then hopefully that will match up. So you can actually check that the end matches. That might be more reliable than looking at the beginning. Let's just check that with the level. And then look at the end. Now, of course, I'd cut this off, but it's all non-destructive. So I can just reveal the video that I'd accidentally cut off. So if I make that go to the end, that's better. Fine. Okay. So far, so good. Now, of course, there's no lead vocal yet, but I've run out of video tracks. So what I'm going to have to do is to export this as a high quality file that I can re-import and then superimpose the vocal over the top as and when I need it. So if I just go to share and export, I can go to movie, select movie destination. Note you can go straight to YouTube from here. I'm going to go to photos and then export this. Now, video quality, I'm going to export this as extreme, because every time you make a video and you do layers and layers and this and that and the other, you lower the quality of it. So I need it extreme. I need it to be as good as possible. So there we go. You just go up to here and it writes your movie. And away you go. So that's kind of how this works. Now, in a minute, I'm going to drag that video back in and you can see that I can add my vocals. Okay, so it's now put that in photos. So I'm going to open another project and just call it Eagle. Fine. 30 frames per second, which is what I had. You can set it so that it automatically recognises frame rate and aspect as well, whether it's 16:9 or 4:3 or whatever it happens to be. So just open a new project. Now at the top, you can see that it says myproject.mp4. If I drag that down, you can see that I've now got a flattened file image of everything that I've recorded there. Great. Now, however, I need to bring the audio file back in, even though it's still there, because if you rebounce with the audio, you do get glitches. So I'm just going to go to imported and bring Fly Like an Eagle back down under here. And you can see that I can match this up exactly with what's happening in the timeline above, which means I can now mute the original video. I'm just going to check that it plays back with everything in sync. And there we are. That's fine. Now, time to import my lead vocals. Now, I could bring the lead vocals in and out because obviously it doesn't happen for the first sort of however long. So there's my vocal track, which I'm going to bring in here. Now, because I'm wearing headphones, I don't have that telltale drum sound anymore. So I'm going to have to find out where my singing comes in and then drag that with respect to the track. Cool. There's an awful lot of preamble here. Okay.
Time keeps on slipping.
Okay, perhaps a slightly premature ending, but okay. Find out where that looks like that one.
Time.
There we go. So I'm going to cut that there, get rid of what came before, and then find out where it comes in on the main track. So I'm just going to drag this into... now, the little eyeball on the left means that you can elect not to see a particular track, which I'm going to just select for the moment, because I want to just find out where those vocals come in.
Time keeps on slipping.
Okay, so around about 10 seconds and 18 frames is where that vocal comes in. So I can drag everything with respect to that and just making sure that that comes in. 18.
Time keeps on slipping.
That's about basically that, right.
Into the future. Time keeps on slipping.
Fine. Now, what I can do with this is to fade in and actually resize this first. I don't really want that vocal thing, that reflection filter in the way there. I just want to see the singing. So right hand side, let's try that. Yeah, so that it's obvious that I'm singing into a mic. Don't need anything at the bottom or the left hand side, and I can soften the edge. Now this means that I can maybe put it over on the right hand side, for example, away from the lead guitar. Actually, I could leave the entire thing in situ, really. Now, you can bring stuff in and out, should you wish, but actually, just for the purposes of this demonstration, I'm not going to worry too much about that. I'm just going to cut it right at the end there, get rid of what came after. And usually I put in a little bit of text at the end, Dan Baker Musician, subscribe and share and like and all of that stuff. But you can, if I just put a transition in, I can do a cross dissolve, which is basically a fade out, and you just drag it onto your video timeline there, and I could make it a slightly longer fade perhaps because there's a bit of silence at the end, so it looks like this. And there we are. So there is basically a way of putting stuff in on LumaFusion. Of course, because I've now bounced this, I could actually, maybe if I wanted to superimpose the guitar solo, I could re-import that guitar solo. Maybe, I'll tell you what, I'm going to do that. Where the guitar actually, where the vocals end, I'm just going to make a slightly bigger version of the guitar solo there, in order to, in order to sort of make something of it. So I'm just going to find where that is. Now you can actually elect to import only a bit of the video so that you're not ending up having to do lots of editing. So I need that little bit at the end. yeah, from there. And then it's kind of, yeah, it's there's the ending there. And then I go to the left and drag that down, revealing that I've only brought 20 odd seconds down. There we go. So once again, I've got to check with that's going to line up. Let's have a look. So it's obviously a little bit. Actually, I could look at the end, because the ending always lines up. Let's just check that ending. It's that one there. Let's go to the end. It's really handy having the telltale waveforms, as I said. It just really, really helps. That's starting to look about right. Let's see what happens. There we are. So now I'm going to resize this so that the fretboard is much, much bigger. Something like that. Be aware, of course, that when you're resizing, you're actually not increasing the quality. In fact, you're decreasing it. It doesn't upscale like, like other things would. Now, I'm just going to crop. It's going to crop the left and the right-hand side slightly, and the bottom as well, and the top, so it just reveals the guitar fretboard. Just make that. Just give it a little bit of softness so you can still see the band behind. And I need this to start actually on the solo itself. So it's going to be about there. Cut that there, cut what came before. I'm going to put a transition so that it just starts a little bit, just comes in. Now I've got to find where the vocals come in. There's a nice telltale sign there. So I can now cut the guitar solo there, cut up what came afterwards, put a little fade on so it fades out, revealing the vocals again. And there we are. That's how to do that. And then I could re-export this as I did beforehand. But there we are. There is a version of how to create a bit of music, audio and video.
Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. Time keeps on slipping, slipping, slipping into the future. I wanna fly like an eagle to the sea. Fly like an eagle, let my spirit carry me. Wanna fly like an eagle till I'm free. Oh Lord, through the revolution. Slipping, slipping, slipping into the future.